How's that? That seems like it's better. Looks like we're getting audio levels. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I don't know what episode this is. It's probably 94, 95, something like that. And, oh my goodness gracious. Seriously. We, once again, get in here ready to do our show, and we plug everything in because we can't have this tripod on the table during the day, and we can't have any of the lights up during the day, and you'd think you could just plug the stuff in and turn it on and it would work, but it never does. You just have to hope, and you don't really know until you hit the stream button, and then you hope, and next thing you know, there's feedback coming from places you've never heard of before, and it's blowing everybody's speakers out, and I'm really tired of it. I'm really, really tired of it. I don't know what to do about it. We tried making a move to live stream, and live stream was, never heard of a JPEG file. Never heard of, a .movie file. So here we are back on Ustream, and I'm just really tired of turning on what should just be pretty easy, It's a USB camera, and it plugs in, and it's a USB microphone, and it plugs in. And you shouldn't have to reconfigure your entire computer every time you turn on your software. But anyway, it's just heartbreaking. I've had enough of it. So I have some news that will probably connect to my surly attitude and mood here today. So I was actually going to be talking to you guys about this anyway because it's affecting a lot of work I do, and so I'll just go ahead and get this out of the way, then we get on with our questions. I've been feeling more and more tired a lot lately. I've been feeling tired most of my working life. I've been feeling tired since I started doing eject, and been getting more tired every day. And I thought, well, I'm not getting enough sleep, or just need to back off on some of this stuff. So finally, after going to the doctors for 10 years and saying I'm tired and still can't see me, some people are saying you can't see me. I can see me. So anyway, I've never been one of these people that was, down on Western medicine. I've never had a problem with Western medicine, any of that stuff. But I would go to the doctors every 2 or 3 years, and I would just say, hey, I'm just tired all the time, and I'm feeling run down, and it's getting worse, and I'm not, just not able to sleep. My sleep system's getting worse, and my energy levels are getting lower, and they'd take a blood test every year, and they'd say, yeah, well, you look fine, off you go. So anyway, after a long time of getting really tired of this, I took a look at going to a different kind of doctor. Went to just a solid nutritionist, really, not a witch doctor or anything. He didn't light any feathers or blow sage on me or anything like that. Can anybody see picture? Because I'm getting people saying they can't see picture. If you can't see picture, I'm just going to stop the show. I'm going to go home. Okay, good. Some people can see and hear fine. In any event, here's what happened. She's terrific. Instead of me getting my 4 minutes of time with the internist, there's 7 waiting rooms, and you're in waiting room 4, and you get your 4.5 minutes of consultation a year. I actually sat down with this woman and talked for about an hour and a half, and then she told me to go down and take about 9 tubes of blood out of my system. By the way, if you're getting audio and no video, everybody's saying just refresh your browser, it should come back. So I went in, and they took 9 tubes of blood out of me, and then I went and took a saliva hormone test, and they basically have to spit into a tube 4 times a day takes a lot of spit to fill one of those tubes, by the way. It's measuring your hormone levels, especially cortisol. So I got the results back on Friday, and I'm not real familiar with these numbers, but apparently among the many things that cortisol does for you is it's what wakes you up in the morning. Your eyes get little sunlight through the eyelids on the retina. Body starts to release cortisol. Cortisol wakes you up. Your morning cortisol, according to this woman, should be somewhere between 20 and 25, a low end of the spectrum in terms of the error bars, in terms of what you need to be. If you're below 13 and a half, you're really in pretty bad shape. So 20 to 25 is what they want. 13 and a half was the bottom of the low normal range, and my morning cortisol was 1.7. 1.7. Turns out your stalwart host here has lately been in stage 3 adrenal exhaustion, and probably been in stage 3 adrenal exhaustion for several months, if not a year. I've been probably in stage 2 for most of my entire life. I cannot wake up, and like they said about going broke, how did you go bankrupt? And it was like, well, slowly at first, but then very quickly. And that seems to be what's happening. These levels are just falling off a cliff. So, needless to say, unlike my good friend Andrew Breitbart, that's not a particular path I want to go down. And I have to tell you, I don't know if anybody's ever gotten that kind of medical diagnosis before, serious medical diagnosis. But if you ever have, there's really two ways to react to it. One of them is to react with just terrible, anxiety and stress and fear and all that other stuff. I was actually enormously relieved and hopeful because, first of all, it's completely recoverable, although it's probably going to take a year. And secondly, I thought I might be functioning at 60 or 70% of what I should be functioning at. And according to the morning cortisol levels, I'm functioning at 5% of what my system should be functioning at. And it gives me vision of what I might be able to do if I was fully awake, fully conscious, and had a little energy in the morning. I was, for years, it's been like, I told her when we did this interview, and I actually got interviewed by the doctor. The doctor actually had some interest in my actual health, and not just, in the 4.5 minutes that they had to spend with me. And she said, when was the last time you woke up feeling rested? I said, I have no memory of waking up feeling rested. And that's not a joke. I have no memory of it. I cannot remember a time in my life when I've woken up going, I can remember sleeping for 12 hours, but I cannot ever remember waking up rested. And having these tests come back is nice. Now, a couple people have said, like Glenn Beck, I don't know if that happened to Glenn Beck. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened to Glenn Beck. And frankly, if it happened to Glenn Beck, it makes me feel even better. Because that would be, put me in good company, and probably for the same reasons. Now, a couple people said, just imagine what a good night's sleep will do for you. That was Guatemalan Water Snake. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. But the problem is, it's not that I don't get an hour's sleep. Every now and then, during the weekend, I'll sleep for 12 hours, and I'll wake up and I'll feel still exhausted. For the last 3 days, I've slept for 16 hours a day, and I still can't wake up. So, what has to happen is some short-term changes and some long-term changes. Obviously, the long-term changes are going to be diet, obviously, getting a regular sleep cycle. And the short-term thing I need to do is cut down on the stress. So I have to tell you that when we got started with the show today, I really was about that close to taking this tripod and just smashing it right through the 4K monitor. And the reason is because one of the things that cortisol does for you is it's a stress buffer, and I get the feeling that my stress buffer has been pretty much pre-buffered and gone for a long time. I'm skiing without cartilage in my legs, just bones on bones. I really don't think I fully appreciate how much watching this administration takes it out of me. I mean, I know it takes it out of everybody, but it has occurred to me that that I just every day have to go out there and this is what I do for a living. Yeah, just go out there and look at, where do you even start with this? Where do you start? It's not even Obama's the problem. It's not that Hillary's the problem, or the lawlessness, or the treason, or any of this. Is that people don't care. They don't care. Nobody cares. And I think after all of it, you know, it just gets you down, and it stresses your system. I've been through an awful lot of emotional stress lately too, enormous, biggest emotional stress of my life. And that was enough to give me a case of shingles, So I'm just beat up and out of elastic is really what it is. So I don't want anybody to worry, because I was good friends with a guy who we all know who actually had a heart attack, was riding himself into the ground. And when Andrew had his first heart attack, a year before his fatal heart attack, he took care of himself for a couple of months, and then he just went right back to doing what he was doing. But I'm not that guy. I got a lot to do. So basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and cut my workload down to about a couple hours a day. And it's come to my attention that if it turns out that I don't get everything done that I want to get done, the world's not going to come to an end. It's a hard thing to realize. This is going to come as a surprise to some people, but it won't come as a surprise to those few people who know me well. I know this may seem shocking to some of you. I consider myself to be the laziest guy on the planet. I really do. I just look at how much I could be doing. I just feel really lazy. And one of the things that's so nice about, it's so relieving about this diagnosis is this is end third stage adrenal fatigue, or adrenal exhaustion, or whatever you want to call it. Like I said, if your morning cortisol should be 20 to 25 and the morning bars are at 13 and yours is 1.7, you're in some real trouble. So I think one of the things that's been endemic for me has been a sense that I'm lazy and that I don't get things done, and it's probably because I'm so tired all the time. I feel like, if I put in a full 8 or 10 hour day, then I would, get things done. But I can't. I get so tired. And people around my life would get a little tired of the afternoon naps, and they'd say, "Well, you're just goofing off." Or anyway, it's a long story. It's a long, complicated story. But there is some really good news in all this, and the good news is when I look at all of the various symptoms that I have in my life, and I consider myself to be a pretty, healthy guy, everything seems to tie itself together to cortisol deficiency, and I mean for a long time. I mean, one of the many symptoms of this kind of cortisol deficiency, depression is one, mood swings, anxiety is one, all these kind of psychological things. Problems with this persistent little tickle cough I have is part of the GI tract. Your entire GI tract is lined with immune cells that are manufactured out of cortisol. Just so much. It takes ultimate look. There are people out there watching the show right now who know 100 times more about this than I do. But for those of you who may not know, and I have had the experience, we're talking about some of these problems of mine have helped other people, so I might as well just dig into this to the degree that I feel like, just always happy to tell you what's going on, because it's kind of what the show's about. What was explained to me was your body makes progesterone, I think it is, and progesterone is almost like a stem cell hormone from which all the other hormones are manufactured. So if you're making enough progesterone, then your body takes some progesterone and makes cortisol for it, and then the rest of it goes to DHEA, which is a kind of a repair hormone. All the sex hormones, they all get boiled out of this progesterone pool. If your adrenals start shutting down and due to stress, either physical stress, emotional stress, too much work, not enough sleep, not enough diet, whatever, then you start making less of this stuff. And as you make less of the progesterone, and I'm probably wrong with the word, but it's something like that. Then what happens is your body says, well, we need the cortisol, so we're going to take the cortisol, we're going to make cortisol, and too bad for the rest of it. So all the repair hormones get shunted off to the side, the sex hormones get shunted off to the side, all of the stuff that really helps you with just general balance gets shunted off to the side. Your body starts stealing more and more of this progesterone to make cortisol. This puts more of a stress on your system, and the more stress your system gets, the more your adrenals want to shut down. And then, as things get worse and worse and worse, your ability to make this progesterone gets lower and lower and lower. Then there's not even enough cortisol, even though your body's taking all of the cortisol. And so there's less and less cortisol to go around, and that means things like your gastrointestinal tract suffers, because your body will do one thing primarily, and that is it's got to maintain blood sugar. Cortisol is responsible for the maintenance of blood sugar, and without blood sugar, you don't wake up. Your brain consumes so much glucose, and nobody really appreciates just what a greedy organ the brain is in terms of how much energy it takes, and so your body will do anything to keep the brain intact, including cannibalizing the rest of the body. And as you get into this kind of death spiral, into stage 3 adrenal exhaustion, you find that virtually all the cortisol that's being made, and it's less and less and less every day, goes to glucose manufacturing and so on. So there's no cortisol to wake you up. It just doesn't exist, not in your body. And that's how you can sleep for 16 hours and still wake up exhausted, because you didn't get any sleep. You get inflammation, you get all kinds of other things. So it's been endemic for me for a long time. I'll bet I've had this for at least 25 or 30 years. I may have had it for 25 years. When I was a limo driver in 1988, 89, when I got out to LA, unlike the other professional limo drivers for whom that was a job, I took it very seriously. And so I was in LA traffic with these people who would be 45 minutes late on their end, and I had to get them to their airplane because they said it was important they get to their airplane. I'd be hauling through LA traffic like a maniac trying to get these people to their flights. It wasn't my problem, but it felt like it was. And even at 31, I could feel like I was like having a heart skipping beats, and went to a doctor at 31. He put me on beta blockers. He said, your body is just so full of adrenaline. Your tissues are full of adrenaline. You're just constantly in this fight or flight cusp, and the slightest little things are just setting you off. So I suspect that I've been severe adrenal imbalance for at least 20 years, maybe 25, 26, 27 years, who knows. I will tell you this, I'm determined to do something about it, and I am going to, take this very seriously, needless to say. And taking it seriously means that in about a year, I think that's probably the outside, in about a year of, managing the stress. I haven't had an actual vacation. I've been away, but I haven't had an actual vacation 6, 7 years, something like that. I make it to the point where I can actually get 10, 12, 13, 15-hour days of work and without it being this giant stress pill. And then I won't feel so lazy. And the work I'll be doing will be better work, and I can get more of it done. I have to tell you, the one thing that's been constantly on my mind since all of this has been going on, really been aware of it for the last 10 days, although the emotional stress for the last 2-3 months has been unbearable. I mean, it's really just been, literally had to stuff a roll of paper towels into my mouth because I was clenching my jaws so hard I thought I was going to fracture my brand new teeth. It's been kind of tough. But one thing that has occurred to me lately, especially, is a sentence of a statement Abraham Lincoln made that made somebody said, try meditating too. That's a very important thing I'm going to have to get into. Very important. Thanks, Matt. But one of the things that Lincoln said that just never left me was, he said, if I had 6 hours to chop down trees, I'd spend 4 hours sharpening my axe. And when I look at somebody who I admire very much, like Glenn Reynolds, Glenn is on a scuba vacation, it seems like 2, 3, 4 times a year. And he does it to sharpen his axe, and that's how he can do the volume of work that he does. He has a full-time job as a law professor, and he also runs a website that gets updated 25, 30 times a day. I've always wondered how he did it. And he does it because he takes vacations, takes care of himself, and sharpens his axe. So I feel like for the last several years now, I've been trying to hack down entire forests, with a wiffle bat, and I think I'll do that. So I think the other thing that's kind of important is this realization that I have to get that look, I have certain deadlines that have to be made. I have one tonight. After the show, I have to get this firewall cut, and I had to delay that firewall shoot a day because I could not get I could not get out of bed on Monday. I just couldn't. I couldn't get out of bed to go across the street to Whole Foods. I was just flatlined. So, in any event, I got, what the hell was I saying? See, this mental fog is part of it too. This kind of confusion and mental fog is just, where the hell was I? This is really frustrating. Oh, yeah, deadlines. I have certain deadlines I have to meet. I go in on Tuesdays and do my trifectas. Every other Tuesday I do Afterburner, and yesterday I shot a firewall, and I've got to edit that tonight after the show. It's a good one too. I like it a lot. In fact, it's one of my all-time favorites. Starts with Sarah Silverman. It's just snarky as can be and fun. But one of the things I was told by this doctor who got me to take this take-home hormone test, among other tests, was that she found herself on vacation, and when she was on vacation, she found that she was still taking calls and answering emails, and she came back from this vacation unrested, and she said that day she put her next vacation in the book. She basically put her vacation times on her schedule, and this was something that would be like a speaking event. It was something that was protected. It wasn't something you tried to shoehorn in there, after after everything else gets taken care of, because everything else gets taken care of later. By the way, we'll get on to the questions in a minute. I don't want to open floodgates here, but as always, it's just so lovely talking to you people, and there's such a smart audience. If either of you, or if any of you out there has experience with this, either personally or are in the profession, much as I appreciate the advice, I just don't want great advice to get lost. But if people out there, or one or two of you, really know what you're talking about here, and you want to hit me up with a Facebook message, I'd be very grateful, because I actually mean to do all of it. I mean all of it, all across the whole board. I want to do the whole thing. So I kind of I'm really looking forward to seeing what life would be like, even at 80% of capacity, because right now, and for the really for the last couple 3 years, or certainly for the last 2-3 months, since middle of February, I've been functioning at 5%. I'll bet 5%, 5 to 10% of my endocrine my capacity. And I just, even if I got to 50%, I'd be a new man. I think in a year I'll be at 100% in Watch Out World. T-Dog Lies mentioned Sarah Silverman. Sarah Silverman's the subject of my firewall that I'm going to edit after this. I have a line I've been waiting to use about Sarah Silverman. I've been wanting to use this line forever. I never had a trigger, but lately, she did this thing where she did this basic lie about the income gap thing. This line I just love so much about Sarah Silverman that I came up with 3-4 years ago, and because everybody's saying, "Oh, Sarah Silverman's such a hottie, she's so pretty," and so I start this video off basically by saying, a progressive hottie, Sarah Silverman. Well, hottie, Sarah Silverman's the best-looking girl at a Star Trek convention. Yeah. So anyway, that's that. So yeah, I have to tell you, when we were teeing this thing up, I know those of you who watch us on YouTube don't get the walk-in music and stuff. I had brand new music. I love the music. For some reason, there was this feedback loop in there, and I couldn't figure out how to go away. And then the graphic was showing image of the video screen behind the graphic, which I can show you right now just for giggles. Oh, now it doesn't do it. See? There you go. Who knows? Who knows how these things work? It's just voodoo. In any event, that's that. So I'm gonna walk myself back to just worrying about the work that has to get done, and if other stuff gets done, great. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. And I should start feeling better pretty soon. And once I start feeling better, then I'll feel better. And the better I feel, then more things like exercise and better nutrition will kick in and all that other stuff. So that's that. So it'll be nice to get a good night's sleep, and nice to be waking up refreshed. It'll be nice to feel like I'm not the laziest guy in all of show business and politics. I'll feel like maybe I won't have to feel so bad about being so tired all the time. So that's that. Anyway, and by the way, I may have to send an email to Glenn Beck and see what he has to say, because I'll bet he got himself in the same situation for the same reasons. But I hadn't heard about that. If anybody has any kind of a link or anything that they can Facebook message me on, if anybody has a story or anything about it, it'd be great. It would really be terrific. Let's get back to astronomy. And I really thought about not doing the show today. I was just feeling so awful, but it always does me good to do the show, isn't it? Feeling better when I do it. So I think we ended up with gravity last time, so probably be a 3-parter. I'd be amazed if it wasn't. So let's move on with the question from Kevin Jordan, because this is a really interesting program. This is our astronomy show part 2 in addition to our endocrine failure part 1 show. This is a question that really is mind-boggling, maybe the most important question out there, and it's the kind of thing that doesn't make much sense, but as you get more and more into the deep structure of the universe, none of it ever makes any sense. So here we go. Kevin Jordan wants to know, as our observation and comprehension of what we are observing in the universe increase exponentially, is the universe reacting to our perception by becoming more complex? If the universe is ever expanding, is that rate tied directly to our ability to understand it, or is that vanity? It certainly seems like vanity, doesn't it? It seems like the highest form of vanity, and it seems like the entire scientific revolution was predicated on the idea of removing humanity from the center of the universe. That, the Earth was literally the center of the universe upon which the entire universe rotated. And yet, what we find experimentally, and even on a fairly macro scale, is we find, well, certainly everybody knows that when you make an observation, you affect the outcome, that the act of observing changes the outcome, or at least on some level changes the outcome. The essence of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle would be that you can know the location of a particle or the speed of a particle, but you can't know both, because by measuring one, you lock out the other. It's not a question of whether or not you have sufficiently sophisticated apparatus. It is in fact built into the structure of the universe, and this is where Schrodinger's cat comes from. The idea that if you put a cat, and it's a kind of a gruesome thought experiment, especially if you're a cat lover as I am, but the idea being, if you put a cat into a closed box, and into that box you put a poison vial and a fuse, let's say acid eating away at a piece of metal, and that the fuse had a precisely 50% chance of killing the cat, burning through and killing the cat, or not burning through and allowing the cat to live, precisely 50%. Then according to probability theory, with the cat in the box, the cat was living in a state of both existence and non-existence, that in a quantum belief anyway, that the cat existed in both states, and that only by opening the box and observing whether or not the cat was alive or dead did you compress these probability waves down to the bottom quantum level and get the answer. The universe responds to the observation, and yet it makes so little empirical rational sense that I suspect it's probably true. We've talked about this before, talked about it last episode. One of the great breakthroughs, and I'm just speaking for myself here, one of the great breakthroughs for me in understanding the universe and in understanding, astrophysics and understanding astronomy, deep history, 10 dimensions, string theory, all this stuff. One of the great breakthroughs for me, and I wish more scientists would come to this point, especially people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who we'll come to later. One of the great breakthroughs for me I came to with that little afterburner I did about Howie, about that little bird, because I was thinking about this little bird that I'd rescued from my cowling in my airplane, and I realized that this bird will never shoot at an instrument approach, no matter how long I try to approach it or teach it. My cat will never do calculus. I can't do calculus. I'm not entirely sure. That I can be trained to do calculus, but I suspect that if I was put in a room and beaten severely, I could probably perform calculus. But my cat will never perform calculus, and Coco the gorilla will never perform calculus, because we just don't have the neurons. We just simply do not have the neurons. There are calculations that are beyond our ability. If you have a 2 megapixel picture, you will not get as sharp an image as you will if you get a 30 megapixel picture, and it doesn't matter how good the lens is. It's just not there. It's just not there. And so when we come to things like this idea of Schrodinger's cat and the uncertainty principle and the idea that we can measure the state of a particle and the particle's antiparticle, which could be at the other end of the universe, by us measuring it here, that other particle instantly commits to being the opposite charge instantaneously, then when you get into these kind of things, there is so much about it that seems incomprehensible that I suspect it's actually true, because the great breakthrough for me is that we are facing things that are beyond our ability to comprehend. If you think that this is a condemnation of humanity or human intellect, it's just exactly the opposite. What we're able to accomplish using models and maps and simulations and theory is astonishing. It's astonishing what we can do. But when people say, how well do you know Texas? Well, I know Texas. I've got a map of Texas. I've driven through Texas. You don't know anything about Texas. Even if you live in Texas your entire life, all you may know about Texas are the general large-scale features of that little limited part of Texas that you've seen. I don't care if you've got a map of Texas and have all the towns memorized. You've got a piece of paper with little blots of ink on it. That's not Texas. That's a map of Texas. The map is not the territory. Texas is infinitely more complex. Anything in the world is infinitely more complex. So this could, in fact, be the case. To get back to the question, what the question is basically saying is this. If it turns out that by observing nature, we change nature, that nature responds to our observation, then you could basically, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but in a nutshell, it basically comes down to this. When you have humanoid observers, like Australopithecus, let's say, he looks up into the sky, or she looks up into the sky, and they see little sparks of light, then the universe did, in fact, consist of nothing more than sparks of light. It wasn't like it was galaxies and stars and this theory says no. It was just that. And as you developed a telescope and you first looked through a telescope, the universe had to become more complex to match the scale and the complexity of your observation. It's not to say that the universe existed in the same state as Schrodinger's cat. It existed in a state of malleability is maybe the best word. And as you observed it, the universe had to collapse itself down to the probability levels of the individual atoms and so on, the particles, and it just had to respond. As we get more and more complex with our observations, the universe appears to become more and more complex in return. Now, the logical, rational, reasonable thing to say is, look, no, it's much simpler than that. The universe is built extremely complex, and we just get more sophisticated at looking at it. That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. That's why it's so hard to get to where this question is coming from. But the mathematical, the deep physical, the quantum evidence, the 11-dimensional theory of things are all indicating that maybe this is not the case. Now you start to get into really interesting things. This is what I think is the best case you can make for the existence of God, frankly. If you want to convince a professional skeptic, a scientist. That's where I used to be. I had it all figured out. I had the universe all figured out. How could I not have it figured out? I mean, I'm a smart guy. Well, it may be more than my little monkey brain can handle. And if it turns out that certain things that we do know are true, there are things we know are true. We know that when we make observations on a quantum level, we change nature. We change it. We know that if we observe nature in a certain way, light behaves as particles. If we observe it in a different way, light behaves as waves. We know that by observing one, it locks out the other. If it turns out that we look at things and change the way they are by our observation, and that is true, whether you like it or not, it's true, then you have to ask yourself, if this is what this cantaloupe-sized hunk of gray jelly can do, what can you do with a bigger consciousness? If you have a larger consciousness, that larger consciousness would be able to make more discrete observations, have more of a discrete effect on the universe as those observations were made. And frankly, if you had a consciousness big enough, you'd be able to just think about something, it comes into being. One of the things that was the most interesting things I ever heard, ever, was by this guy who, I forget his name, but he's the guy who's done this video I spoke so highly of, and I still think is the most important single thing I've ever seen, called Imagining the 10th Dimension. It's on YouTube. Imagining a 10th dimension is a look at why there are 10 dimensions. He looks at 0 dimensions, 1 dimension, 2 dimension, 3 dimensions. We're good through, 2 to 3 dimensions. First dimension, got it. Second dimension, yeah, easy. Flatland. Third dimension, that's us. Fourth dimension, yeah, I can see how we're moving through the fourth dimension. Fifth dimension, sixth dimension, seventh dimension, eighth dimension, ninth, all the way up to 10. So there are 11 dimensions, the 0 being the bottom dimension. But what this guy said, almost in passing, because he's done 100 videos, he said that the ultimate structure of the universe is not matter, and the ultimate structure of the universe isn't gravity. It's not the interplay of energy. He said that the actual structure, the architecture of the universe is information. Now that is a profound insight. Maybe he's wrong. Who knows? Maybe it is just as simple as it looks. But his argument that really rang me was the idea that it might in fact be a universe built out of information. That the information, the ability to discriminate between one state and another, is what compresses the probabilities of quantum existence into actual existence. In other words, the observation forces the external world to make a decision. That's really what it comes down to. When you observe something, when you're doing it just on a very simple level with electrons, with Heisenberg, when you make the observation, you are forcing that particle to make a decision. You are telling it, we're looking for a wave, therefore we can't, or we're looking for your position, therefore we can't know your speed. We're looking for your speed, therefore we can't know your position. Your observation changes the state of matter, state of nature changes in response to the question being asked, and you have imported information into a system and forced the universe to make a decision. Now, that is bloody interesting, isn't it? I mean, that's just really interesting. And look, this would all be just, this would be no different than any other nutty theory, except that the math is behind it. There's math. There's actual math. It has predictive value. The cell phones don't work without this theory, and photoreceptors don't work without this theory. Nothing works without this stuff working. And so, if you start to understand, let's just assume it's true, because it's the way you learn things, right? You make an assumption the world is true, and let's just see. Best way to disprove a bad theory is to assume it's true. Best way to disprove the Loch Ness Monster theory is to assume that it really is a plesiosaur living in Loch Ness. Once you start from the belief that it's an actual plesiosaur living in Loch Ness, the theory falls apart immediately. Just assume that we never went to the moon. The whole thing was a fake. When you think about the problems you have to build in order to overcome the reality and make the fraud, then the moon landing fraud theory falls apart. So give it to it and take it as it exists. It is remarkable, it's astonishing, it's weird, but it appears to be true. So, where does that leave you? Kind of comes back to the question we were discussing earlier about, is there other life in the universe? Hard to say. Maybe there are pockets of, if I had to guess, right? If I had to guess, I would say that and this is going to sound very bizarre, but try to imagine the universe as basically as a sea of pudding, okay? It's just a giant sea of possibility. And I'm not a physicist. If I had to guess based on all the little sips out of the well that I've taken, this is what I would say the universe is. If you could get far enough back on it and look down onto it, the universe would be a sea of pudding, basically be a sea of undifferentiated probabilities. When I say pudding, I don't mean matter. I mean it's in a state of perpetual probabilities. And I don't think we're the only intelligent life in the universe. I think the odds are just too strong against that, but I think it's rare. And so I would say that if you could look down upon it, maybe what you would see is you'd see this giant sea of pudding. And then in small areas throughout this goop of uncertainty, there would be small little pockets of complexity. And these pockets of complexity would not be driven by the state of gravity or anything else. They'd be driven by the fact that there is an observer, that there is some observer there, and that as the observer, meaning the species or whoever, not an individual, series of individuals, as that observer becomes more sophisticated, the area within their observation becomes more sophisticated, and it expands out the complexity of that observation bubble. Now, that may not seem to make any sense, but if you think of the universe as being built out of information, it makes a lot of sense, because what you're really talking about is the structure of the universe becoming more complex in the areas surrounding observers who are capable of asking intelligent questions. And the more intelligent their questions and their queries become, the more complex that area of the universe within their observation horizon has to be. I think I've solved everything now. I'll probably just go home. If that's what I can do with 5% endocrine function, then I would say keep me out of the state of endocrine health, because I'll simply be able to bore through graphite and, with my mind. Granite. Meant to say granite. See? This is what happens when you're confused. Anyway, that's what I think. It's a great question, and I don't know. I have it's so far out of whack that it's got a ring of truth to it that I can't put my finger on. Susan Speakman says, what do you think of astronomer, scientist, personality, lib flavor of the month, Neil deGrasse Tyson? I forgot what time we were going to take this question, so I didn't import this, but I would import it now. I have been saving it, so give me one moment here to produce a piece of evidence about what I think of Neil deGrasse Tyson. There's a couple things I just need to bring in here real quick, so give me 1 second, and let's just pretend that I'm just going to continue to talk. I'm not a fan, actually, of Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I haven't been a fan of him for the time he started talking politics. Hang on 1 second while I prepare a little piece of work for Mr. Tyson here. That ought to do it. Yeah, Neil deGrasse Tyson apparently tweeted this not too long ago. See, that should just show up here, and it doesn't. Why doesn't it do that? Oh, that is just so bizarre. Let's try this. Hang on. Yeah, see, that's just kind of weird. Will that do it? No, it won't do it. God. One more time. We're going to try one more time. He's got a tweet, and I'm trying to get it in here, so help me. I really am. Would it be a picture? It's an obnoxious, very obnoxious tweet, and I'll read it to you in a minute here. If I can't get it imported, this should just come in. Here, let's see what happens if I do this. Does it... There it is. Let's try this. Can you hear me now? Apparently you can. Okay. Yeah, this is one of the many things that Neil deGrasse Tyson tweeted. He tweeted this. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the divided states of America and to the pacts for which it stands, one nation at odds, divisible with liberty and justice for some. And, of course, Neil, as we know, the struggle continues. The struggle continues, Neil. I don't know, what do you say about that? Here's another, mixed race multimillionaire talking about how this incredible state of injustice continues because he's got his liberal D-bag friends that he needs to impress with his incredible and unbelievable depth of emotional and feeling and historical knowledge. It's just a bunch of crap. It's utter nonsense. To the PACs for which it stands, this country is not run by PACs. There's not PACs running this country. The only thing in this country that has coercive force over you is the government that he likes so much. That's the only thing that has actual coercive force over you is the government. If I'm a PAC for chewing gum or I'm a PAC for running shoes, I have the ability to influence certain representatives, just like any other group of people in the country have an ability to influence certain amounts of representatives. But the other thing is actual coercive control is the government. So, number one, you can take that and stuff it. As far as the country being divisible and at odds, Neil, it's people like you who are continuing this ongoing myth that black people are assassinated on the streets of America, and that, if you're a hardworking, honest black person, you can't get a job in this country because of all the prejudice. It's just nonsense. It's utterly true. It's just, utterly false. It hasn't been true in 60 years. It's probably 60 years since you could make a case, and it's been 30 or 40 years since you could bring a legal case against this, because you simply cannot function that way in America today. There is not a person in America, no matter how prejudiced they are, who's working at Walmart or anywhere else, who can basically say, I don't like you, I'm not going to hire you because you're black. It's absurd. In fact, we all know that the opposite is true. It's not that a black kid can't walk through a white neighborhood. There's a lot of black neighborhoods that white kids can't walk through. And that black people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's standing up speaking truth to power, please, you're the director of an observatory, you're an international personality, you did the show on Discovery or whoever else made it. It was unbearable reproduction of Carl Sagan's show, and you're trying to tell me that things are so tough for the black man in this country. Come on, buddy, give me a bloody break, will you? It's like watching the Academy Awards with these guys singing the song from Selma and talking about how maybe someday, who knows, maybe in America someday a black man will be able to win an Emmy or an Oscar. Can you imagine such a world? No, it's so far in the future, it boggles the mind. We simply just can't imagine a world where a black person could be the president of the Academy of Arts and Sciences, or maybe there'd be a black astronaut someday. Just imagine. Can you imagine a crazy science fiction nutty world like that, where a black person has a chance to succeed in this god-awful racist KKK America? My God, maybe even someday they'll have black astronomers. Who knows? No, it's just weird. It's weirder than the stuff we were talking about a second ago with this idea of imagining our own universe. It's just something we got to put out of our minds. It's inconceivable. Next thing you know, they're going to be talking about having a black president or something like that. Imagine such a crazy, nutty, whacked out, foreign, upside down sci-fi world as that, Neil. What a D-bag. What an absolute douche. And the reason he's doing it is the reason that all the rest of these progressives douches do it, and it's what my firewall tomorrow is about. You got to, when the guy who Sarah Silverman accused of paying him Sarah Silverman accused a comedy club owner of paying her $10 when he paid a male $60, and this guy came back, because the internet unfortunately doesn't go away. This guy came back and said, the guy we paid $60 for, Sarah, was booked. You came in on open mic night and asked me if you could try out some new material. And out of the kindness of my heart, I gave you $10 a cab fare, and you want to make me into a misogynist who paid you less because you're a woman? It was a guest spot. You were unknown. You were trying out material. But this comedy club owner said, in your effort to appear like some kind of superhero on a noble cause, you forgot to mention that part. And he hit it on the head, because Neil deGrasse Tyson and Sarah Silverman are both superheroes on a noble cause. You know why they're superheroes on a noble cause? You know why Neil deGrasse Tyson is posting things like that about how hard it is to be black in America, and why Sarah Silverman is posting things on how hard it is to be a woman in America? Because if they weren't superheroes on a noble cause, then Neil deGrasse Tyson and Sarah Silverman would both be multi-millionaire, rich, fat cat 1%ers who are hoarding all of the money that should be going into other people's health care and killing the planet through their consumptive ways. That's why they're doing it, because they have to show you that they're swell people. They're not like the other millionaires out there who just have money. They're multimillionaires, but they care about the struggle. Please, 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 spare me. You want to impress me, Neil, with your moral authority? Why don't you come out and say, hey, this is a free country, anybody can do what they want if they work hard enough? That would impress me. You want to show me what an individual you are? You want to break out from the pack? Say something like that. That would impress me. For Neil deGrasse Tyson to make a statement like that, and to consistently make statements like this, is just to show what a gigantic, ongoing sort of circle jerk of moral superiority this whole thing is, so that they don't get eaten with the rest of the people when the people they support, like Occupy Wall Street, start throwing bricks through rich people's homes. They want to be able to have their little badge say, no, I'm one of you, I'm one of you. Yeah, well, they are one of you, and they'll eat you last. It's just so bloody disgusting and disgraceful. I just don't know where to go with this sometimes, I don't know where to go with it. I don't know what planet these people are living on, and it's just another indication that this progressivism is such a dead, ancient, diseased, sick philosophy of envy and entitlement and resentment and that the limousine liberals climb on board it because they want to be seen as good people, despite the fact that they made money through their hard work and effort. What a D-bag. And this is what our social class is made of. This is what they're made of. This is what all of them are made of now. Even the people that succeed and make money now, they got to toe this line. I don't toe this line. You want 5 houses, knock yourself out. You want 20 houses? If you made your money legitimately and you didn't steal or you didn't coerce anybody else out of their money, you want 50 houses or 100 houses, knock yourself out. Somebody's got to build those houses. Somebody's going to get paid for it. Neil deGrasse Tyson. And let me say one more thing about Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil, this is to you directly. You're not as smart as you think you are. I know you think you're really smart, but you're not as smart as you think you are. You're not 5% as smart as Carl Sagan. And somebody pointed out, I'd love to remember who it was, but last week somebody pointed out the difference between Carl Sagan's cosmos and your cosmos is Carl Sagan would talk to you as if you're an adult and leave you feeling like an 8-year-old in terms of wonder, and you talk to people like an 8-year-old and make you want to change a channel like an adult. Right? That's the difference between Carl Sagan and you. You're not that smart, Neil. I have yet to hear anything out of Neil deGrasse Tyson's mouth that was insightful, interesting, or new. He's just, what is he? Neil deGrasse Tyson is the Vanilla Ice of celebrity astronomy. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of attitude in front of very, very, very little talent. You're not that smart, Neil. You're not that smart. I've heard smart people talk, and they don't sound like you. You want to talk to a smart person? Why don't you sit and listen to what Thomas Sowell sounds like? Because when you listen to Thomas Sowell, there's a guy who knows what he's doing. You should just sit and listen to him, because he'll show you what actual, genuine breakout intelligence sounds like. And Thomas Sowell doesn't need to tweet stuff like that nonsense in order to show people that he's smart, because Thomas Sowell is actually smart. Thomas Sowell's got an IQ probably of, 170, 180. He doesn't have to go around telling everybody how smart he is. He is smart. You see? That's how it works. I don't expect you to get it, Neil. I think it's probably way beyond your intellectual capabilities, if you really want to know. By the way, speaking of things that I'm trying to import, why would this, hopefully the last one work, maybe this one will work too. You should just go in there, but you don't. Why is that? If I double click you, you should show up, but you don't. Why? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense. What if I put you up here? Would you go up there? No, if you're up there, would you go? Hey, okay. That's cool. Hang on a second, folks. We got something interesting kind of cool here. It's got nothing to do with astronomy. I'm just trying to... Why is the background there? It doesn't make any sense at all. Give me 1 second, because this will be worth it. This, you want everybody saying, hey, Bill, you need to calm down? All right, I'll calm down. I'll calm down by showing you one thing here that I just made up and that I like. And so, there you go. What is it? Here? Yes? Yeah? It's worth a wait, believe me. Trust me on this one. It's worth a wait. I'm just going to crop the left and right margin for reasons that... Nope, that doesn't work. Okay, well, I'm going to put it in anyway, so to hell with it. Here you go. This is some work I did for Big Bat Problems. I had some time to kill, and I wanted to do something low stress. So I did. Here you go. Nothing to do with astronomy. This is a logo for the guy who flies the airplane in Big Bat Problems, a former Navy pilot who sees one of these bats, and now he flies a Sky Arrow. And a Sky Arrow is painted navy gray, and it's got actual machine guns on it, and it's an actual fighter airplane that's painted Sky Arrow. Guess who's going to play that in the movie? Got a couple lines. But this is the tail art for that. Tell me if this is cool or not. Wicked. Ignore the background of the, the horrible tweet that I can't seem to get rid of. I still don't understand how they put these pictures together. But I just threw that together. I found some art of a hummingbird, and then I found some art of a mean-spirited eye, and I found art of a bat, and I stretched the nose out and stuff, and that's going to be on the tail of the aircraft that belongs to the personal Air Force in Big Bat Problems. And Big Bat Problems, strangely enough, writing that movie actually lowers my blood pressure significantly. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of wicked. I think that's cool tail art. And I think it's especially cool tail art to be on the tail end of a tiny, 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 tiny little airplane, which I will show you a picture of. because I took a recent one. I've been doing a lot of flying lately. That did me a lot of good. Give me 1 second here to get over this, and you'll all be pleased to know this is actually lowering my blood pressure, because I should not be taking questions about Neil deGrasse Tyson in my physical condition. Here, how about I got 2 of them that I like a lot. Here, I'm just gonna bring these in real quick. So, everybody, be cool. Don't panic. Nobody panic. Please don't panic. So, as long as you don't panic. So what I'm going to do basically, and now I can close you, is this. I'm going to show you just 2 recent pictures of my fantastic sky arrow. I'm going to bring them into the program. I'm not going to care about the formatting. I'm not going to care about what's showing up. I'm not going to care about any of that stuff. Just going to hook up the microphone. So here we go. I'll bring you in too, because they're cool. So what I plan to do for the movie is I plan to go ahead and get this airplane painted, and painted like a Navy jet. Hey, there it is. Ignore the nonsense in the background. I can't make any sense out of it. I'm not going to spend time doing it now. So take that little airplane and paint it, you know, kind of that navy gray, and paint some panels on it, and paint, like, you know, ejection seat logos and rescue things, and, you know, and give it all that stuff. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the bat logo on the tail, and I'm going to just make it look like everything else in this movie. Like, this guy, this character, was a former Navy pilot who ran into one of these bats, and now he's barking mad, and he's decided to take a little airplane, and we have our own, you know, the big bat problem militia has its own air force. They scout ahead. They do watch out for speed traps, and they provide aerial reconnaissance. And let's see if I can talk my buddy Alfonso Rachel to playing a helicopter gunner from the Army, and he's going to sit in the back with a grenade launcher, and they're going to just chunk down some grenades on these flying bats. And I'm going to put machine guns on the side. I'm going to put 2, this is all for the movie obviously, going to put 2 AR-15s on the, it's a shame that the mouse doesn't show up, that the cursor doesn't show up. But if you look at where the red stripe is, as it goes towards the back, I'm going to put an AR-15 to either side, bolted to the side, and that the magazine release switch will be in the back, so that the guy in the back will be putting in 30-round mags into the back of the AR-15s, and it'll have twin machine guns, and the back windows come out so that the guy in the back can plunk some rocket grenades down there, paint the thing kind of gray, get myself a helmet, you know, and we'll wear flight suits, and it'll be my chance to be a fighter pilot on camera. So I feel much better already. I can feel the cortisol levels rising even as we speak. So I think that'd be kind of badass. But I just go back and show that one more time, because I think that logo with the bat is really cool. So this is what's going to go on the back of the airplane, and I actually did some artwork that I like too for the guy's helmet. So I'll put this up real quick. I'm getting the hang of this. I'm not going to worry about the other thing. So that's the tail logo, and here's some helmet art. I like the hummingbird angle. I think the hummingbird angle is really cool. Vipercheck, who's an actual F-16 pilot, apparently says he doesn't think that the Sky Arrow can carry a Ma Deuce. It can't. Couldn't get off the ground with it. But you could get 2 AR-15s strapped to the airplane side, and then have the magazines be on the inside. So you could put a couple of 5.56 rounds out there. Probably not going to do a lot of damage, but it'll get some change. Why 30-round mags? Ask Big Booty. Well, maybe you could use a 100-round barrel magazine. That'd be fun. We'll see. Anyway, I like the idea of a guy making his own little private airplane into his own Air Force, and having the hummingbird be the logo, because the thing is so tiny and so small and so light. And I think it'd be fun to paint the Sky Arrow that way and fly it around, and certainly get a lot of attention, you know? Get a lot of attention. Anyway, back we go. Ray Schneider says, so how come Uranus is on its side, and how does this stuff about craters work to tell the age of things? 2 good questions. Uranus is on its side. There's some suspicion that because Uranus has some very unusual properties to it, it's the third gas giant. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Jupiter's gigantic, Saturn somewhat smaller. Uranus and Neptune are both relatively small. They're only 3 or 4 Earths across. If you put Uranus next to the Earth, it just looks like, you know, big planet, but not big in the same way Jupiter is. But Uranus is unusual because it's lying on its side. And it doesn't mean that one pole is always facing to the Earth. It means that one pole is always facing in a certain direction in space, and as it orbits the Earth, there are times when the North Pole is facing the Sun and times when the South Pole is facing the Sun. It's got a very long orbital period. Somebody will tell me what it is. I don't remember now, but it's got to be in the order of about, 50, 60 years, something like that. Saturn's 30-ish. So 24, 27 for Saturn, something like that. So it's usually doubles on the way out. Nobody really knows why Uranus is on its side. There's some evidence that Pluto, there used to be believed that Pluto was a moon of Uranus that was kicked out by whatever caused Uranus to go over. Almost certainly was caused by the close approach of a large body of gravitational body from outside the solar system. However, one of the things that I've heard, and I want to get to this a little later with the moon thing, is that it is not that any spinning body, like the Earth or Mars or anything like that, has a relatively stable sort of a spin, and over long periods of time we know that the Earth's axis precesses. That's where I think it's about a 23,000-year cycle where the Earth's pole points to different parts of the sky. Right now the Earth's pole is pointing towards a faint star called Polaris, second or third magnitude star called Polaris, which is the pole star. But over the course of thousands and thousands of years, that axis wobbles, so the night sky no longer turns around Polaris, it turns around blank places in the sky, and comes fairly close to Vega, which is a very bright star, fifth brightest star. But nothing is as close to the circle of potential north celestial poles. The north celestial pole is what the Earth rotates around. The Earth spins on its axis, so the sky appears to rotate around a point that doesn't move, and that point is where the Earth's axis is projected out to. That's the north celestial pole, just a point in the sky. Because the Earth wobbles and precesses over the space of, I want to say, about 23,000, 26,000 years, that point moves in a circle, and then it comes back to the same spot again. Interesting coincidence for us is that even though Polaris is not the brightest star on that circle, Vega is much brighter. Polaris is the closest star to lie on the circle. It's only about a degree off. And furthermore, right now, the North Celestial Pole is as close to Polaris as it possibly could be. So as years go on, the North Star is going to get further and further away from the North Celestial Pole. It'll be a little less useful. Eventually, it'll be useless. Why do I bring all that up? Well, because in addition to the Earth's rotation, which happens every 24 hours, the Earth's orbit, which happens every 365 days, the precession of the Earth, like a spinning top of the axis moving around, which happens every 26,000 years, 23,000 years, something like that. There is some evidence that says that spinning bodies like this will eventually flip over, that they will flip over. I've heard evidence that says that Mars once was flipped over, that all of them eventually flip over time. And the flip doesn't take very long in terms of the length of the total cycle, but it happens. I don't know if that's true or not, but somebody said that one of the reasons that the moon is so important to Earth's life is that the moon gives the orbit of the moon helps to arrest this. Now, if it turns out that this polar flip is just part of the nature of spinning bodies, then you can see how, without the moon, life on Earth would still exist, but intelligent life likely not. Certainly technologically life likely not, because the planet flipping over on its side, which takes thousands of years, is a catastrophe. It's a catastrophe not because everything just slides off into earthquakes. It's a catastrophe because if for the space of 2,000 or 3,000 years, while the planet is lying on its side, half of the year the North Pole is facing towards the sun and the other half of the year the South Pole is facing towards the sun, it means that virtually the entire planet is cooking for 6 months out of the year and freezing for 6 months another half of the year, and that knocks a lot of life off the table. It just resets the clock. You go back to zero, and you start with your algae and your mosses, and you just, all right, here we go again. Now, we've had a number of extinction level events on planet Earth, but if something like this is regular, then you could see why there aren't so many intelligent species in the world or in the universe. But if the moon helps to inhibit that, then once again, it's the presence of the moon. It's the moon that makes Earth unique for intelligent life. If anybody has any information on that, I'd love to hear it. So I don't know what caused Uranus to go over on its side. I do know that it's the only planet currently on its side. Those of you who say, well, this can't be possible, might have to explain why Venus rotates backwards. All other planets looking down from the North Pole appear to rotate counterclockwise. Is that right? Yes. Looking down from the top, Venus rotates clockwise, the only planet that does that. And slowly, too, 260 days, all this stuff's coming from the top of my head, but something like that. So, any kind of long-term, long-cycle irregularities that cook half the planet and freeze half the other are not conducive to intelligent life. It's very hard to kill all the life on Earth, but it's possible to kill the big life forms fairly easily, and asteroids will do that. And if this planet keeps falling over on its side, well, that's another case for why we're unusual. The moon helps. The moon, of course, is Earth's a double planet. The moon is stabilizing, and we talked in the first episode about how the moon protects us against so many asteroid impacts, just knocks them out. It takes some, it just literally blocks them as a shield, and others it simply accelerates out or in, and it's amazing really how wonderful that moon is, and I want to come back to the moon when we get to that question, I think. But the other part of your question I think is kind of interesting, and this one I actually can answer, and answer relatively simply. How does this stuff about craters work to tell the age of things? That actually works fairly simply. The more craters that an object has, the older it is. And it's pretty simple really to understand. Most of the cratering that took place in the solar system happened during the first billion years or so of the solar system as the solar system was assembling itself. In other words, in the early days of the solar system, the planets were still molten. There were literally billions and billions of large objects. And they're all in motion, and basically what's happening during the first billion or so years of the solar system is the planets are aggregating. More and more objects are impacting the surface of these protoplanets, making them bigger, and the bigger they get, the more gravity they have. The more gravity they have, the more they pull in more of this junk, and they're basically vacuuming out space. Space is amazingly empty. You see things like the asteroid. This is another one of these things we talked about last episode, how if you look at the solar system, the planets all look so big, but they're incredibly small compared to the sun, and they're incredibly spaced out. And you see the asteroid belt, and it's a series of dots, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of asteroids in the asteroid belt. Well, as it turns out, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of asteroids in the asteroid belt, but they're so tiny and so spaced out that you'd never see them. You go through the asteroid belt, you can go back and forth through the asteroid belt for the rest of your life and never see an asteroid, never come near an asteroid. They're incredibly empty. And one of the reasons the solar system is so empty is because virtually all of the good stuff has already hit something. Now, Jupiter, for example, is the solar system's vacuum cleaner. Without Jupiter, we'd be taking impacts today, massive impacts. Jupiter's gravity is so enormous that Jupiter's just swept up a bunch of the stuff that would have kept hitting Earth and kept resetting the intelligence clock, the life clock. Some big old thing that was meant for Earth got sucked up by Jupiter. Some of them are still in place around Jupiter. Those of you who are really into this kind of thing know that there are stable gravitational positions called Lagrange points, and some of them precede Jupiter by its orbital diameter, and some of them trail Jupiter by its orbital diameter. They're called the Trojans and the... what's the other one? I forget. But basically, there's clusters of asteroids moving in front of Jupiter, clusters of asteroids moving in back of Jupiter, and likewise for the Earth and the other planets. So, the answer to your question here with a cratering, Ray, is this. If you look at the moon's a perfect example. If you look at the surface of the moon, you'll find that parts of the moon are very heavily cratered, and they're light in color. And other parts of the moon are much, much less heavily cratered, and they're darker in color. Now, sometimes one of these most brilliant craters, like Tycho, Copernicus, on the moon will make an incredible impression because it's on a very dark, relatively flat, smooth plane, and there's this brilliant white crater with all the rays of ejecta that's spread out over the surface of the moon. Now, the reason we know that this makes perfect sense. The reason we know that the lunar lowlands, the Maria, the dark areas, are younger than the other areas because there's fewer craters on them. So the way to think about this is this. Here sits the proto-moon, and finally the moon cools to the degree where the surface is no longer molten, which means that a crater can form and survive. it's getting hit all the time, and it's just getting so cratered, and pretty soon we have saturation on the moon. Mercury's saturated. Virtually all the objects in the solar system that don't have atmospheres are saturated. Enceladus is saturated. All the moons of Saturn are saturated. What that means is you cannot put a crater down without destroying pre-existing craters. They're just literally nothing but craters. The more the craters, the older the object is, because they've been taking craters for a longer period of time. The reason that the dark areas on the moon are not as cratered is because much more recently than the big asteroid impacts that caused most of the cratering, some very large impacts flooded the surface of the moon with basalt from down below. And so basically, if you look at the gigantic lunar seas, most of them are arcs. They're enormous impact craters, absolutely spectacularly large, from objects that were so big that they not only wiped out the other existing craters, they caused magma to seep up from the surface of the still molten moon. And because this is young, all of this lava came up, and it basically solidified and made a nice, dark, smooth surface. Now, onto that, since the formation, which happened later than most of the cratering, the amount of cratering goes down with time because most of the objects have been cleaned up and hit things. Every now and then, there's a crater on a dark floor of the Maria. The more craters there are, the longer it's been exposed to cratering. The fewer craters there are, the less time it's been exposed to cratering. So anytime you see a smooth surface in the solar system, you know that surface is relatively new. Relatively new is billions of years. The reason there are so few visible craters on Earth is because Earth, unlike Mars, unlike Venus, really unique among the terrestrial planets, the hard planets, Earth still has a molten core, and Earth has plate tectonics, which means that over long periods of time to us, but relatively short periods of time in the life of the solar system, parts of the Earth crust get subducted underneath other parts, and other parts continue to grow. The Atlantic Ocean is getting wider. Right at the mid-Atlantic ridge, the Earth is coming apart. New materials being pushed out, and old materials going under. And that means that the surface of the Earth is constantly being resurfaced. So there's a couple reasons why there are so few craters visible on Earth. There's a few. Barringer Meteor crater is a small one. You can occasionally see round lakes or circular lakes as the result of impacts. There's a big impact crater underneath the Gulf of Mexico, which was the Yucatan impact that wiped out the dinosaurs last time. But basically, there's very few craters on Earth, and there's several reasons for this. One of the reasons is because the Earth has an atmosphere that breaks up incoming large objects into smaller objects. Tunguska was a pretty good example, and for those of you who saw that giant Russian meteor from 2-3 years ago, basically asteroids are not solid rock. Most of them are rubble piles. And if something like an asteroid or a comet, which consists of a lot of mass but not terribly tightly held together, as this stuff hits the atmosphere, especially if it's at an angle where it's got more atmosphere to go through, it'll break up into little pieces, and these little pieces will knock down trees and stuff, but they won't scoop out a big old crater. So one of the reasons the Earth doesn't have a lot of craters is because the atmosphere protects us from certain types of impacts. The second reason that we have fewer visible craters is because of weather. The fact that it rains and that wind blows and that that sediments are deposited by rivers and stuff covers up craters that have actually formed on the Earth. And over a very long period of time, the craters that had been on the proto-Earth basically just got subducted into the crust along with everything else over the course of time. And as new material came out, which is newer, the new material that makes up the current surface of the Earth is post-peak cratering material. It's not to say that impacts don't still happen, but, the Earth's about 4.6 billion years old, and if you'd been around 4 billion years ago, this stuff would be coming down hither and yon, just would have been cool. One of the things I hope to see, the chances are extremely small, very small, but not zero. I want to say back in the early 90s, I think it was, Comet Shoemaker-Levy, there was an a comet that passed very close to Jupiter, very close. It came so close to Jupiter that Jupiter's gravity tore it into shreds, into pieces, broke it up into several different pieces. And as the two orbits got into a certain resonance, they realized that Jupiter and this comet are going to be in the same place at the same time again several years from now or whatever, and this will be back in 93. and that large pieces of a large comet were going to hit Jupiter in front of our eyes. And not only in front of our eyes, we actually had a probe either, I can't remember whether we had a probe in orbit or whether it was on its way, Galileo. But it must have been on its way because we don't have any pictures of the actual impact. But anyway, several years ago, back in the 90s, I want to say it was 93, I'm not sure. We knew that a comet and Jupiter were going to be in the same place. And sure enough, even though the comet hit on the far side of Jupiter, very quickly, Jupiter spins every, it was about 11 or 12 hours, I guess, 10 hours, something like that. As the planet rotated, you could see these scars where these enormous comets had hit Jupiter, releasing hundreds, if not thousands or millions of megatons of energy, just enormous explosions. And in infrared, you could see the plume from around the planet. You could see the plume of hot gas being blown out into space by these comets hitting Jupiter. Now, I don't want to see that hit the Earth, needless to say, but one of the things I would like to see that I think would just be cool to see, and we have the means to at least give me some warning, is I would like to see a significant meteor impact on the moon. I think that would be cool. An asteroid or meteor impact. I think it'd be cool if you said, yep, at 2:45 in the morning on 29th of November, 2023, asteroid 1962, which is not very big, maybe 200-300 feet across, is going to impact somewhere in Oceanus Procellarum, and get ready. And then I think it'd be a heck of a thing to see. It'd be a blinding white flash, and this glowing ejecta would come out. Ejecta. I keep saying ejecta. That was the name of my fictional land in the days of eject. This glowing ejecta would come out, and a lot of it would fall back to the moon, and it would lay this white kind of brand new rays on the moon. It wouldn't have to be a super big impact either, by the way. Small is fine for me. And presumably, if it was big enough and hard enough, a period of a week or two would go by, and then all of a sudden we would start to get incredible showers of meteors that wouldn't be composed of regular meteors, iron meteors or carbonaceous chondrites, stony meteors. We would start to see enormous meteor showers for days or weeks or months, and they'd be of molten glass, and they'd be of silicates that had been ejected from lunar gravity by this impact, molten, glowing red hot, cool down back to black glass like obsidian, and then some of them would be caught in the Earth's gravitational field and then come into our atmosphere. So you'd have these incredible light show on the moon. That'd be cool. That'd be really cool. And you'd have this glowing pattern of ejecta. That would be cool. And then over time, the stuff would come into the Earth's atmosphere, and as it came into the Earth's atmosphere, then you'd get these incredible meteor showers. And these things are called tektites. And tektites are found all over the Earth, but they're found in patterns, and they're found at certain times. And tektites are glass fragments. They're actually moon rocks. We suspected it for a long time, but we had moon rocks on the Earth since there's been humans. And they're little glass particles. Sometimes they're tiny little things about that big. And it's, pieces of the moon that were blown off of the moon by impacts and then ended up in Earth, went through the Earth's atmosphere, re-entered, and landed on the moon, on the Earth. And somebody knows how to do this. I certainly don't, but there's a couple of, we have Mars rocks on the moon too. There's a couple of meteorites, I should say, that have landed on the Earth that are chemically proven to have come from Mars. So there are Mars rocks on the Earth. By the way, for those of you who are keeping score and maybe want a program to take with you, there are 3 different classifications of that term meteor, and I occasionally, through laziness, get them wrong, but I do know the difference, so here they are. A small object in space, smaller than an asteroid, a small object, a rock, size of a football, something like that. It is called a meteoroid. It's a meteoroid. And as long as it remains in space, it's a meteoroid. The word meteor actually just refers to the flash. So technically speaking, meteors do not land on Earth. Once it's landed on Earth, it's a meteorite. So it's a meteoroid in space. The flash of light we see is the actual meteor. And once it's down on the ground, it's a meteorite. Just thought you might want to know that. So meteors do not land on Earth. No one's ever been struck by a meteor. One person, at least one, maybe more, have been struck by meteorites. No one's ever been struck by a meteoroid. But you could be in outer space, in the space station, be struck by a meteoroid, and you might be struck by a meteorite, but you will never be struck by a meteor. There now, got that all settled. Moving on. Trey, is it Lyles? Trey Lyles, I guess, said, if you had the ability to decide, would you make Pluto a planet again? I would not make Pluto a planet again, because Pluto doesn't deserve to be a planet. The reason Pluto doesn't deserve to be a planet is because we now know, for the longest time, Pluto was, look, you classify things according to the way you classify them, right? When you have something, when you have a class of things, you put them in that class. If it turns out that there are enough distinctions within that class to separate things in one class into two different classes routinely, predictably, and constantly, then it's time for a new class. So when the solar system consisted of a sun and planets, then Pluto was a planet, obviously. It was the 9th planet. But when you start to discover objects that are smaller than real planets, and when you discover enough of them, and when you discover, especially when you discover at least one, but now there are many more than one, that are not different than Pluto in any way, then Pluto's not a planet anymore. It is a planetoid. It's a microplanet. It is part of a class of objects that inhabit the outer solar system, was discovered first. It is, I think, just barely the biggest. There's another one that is within 100 miles of the size of Pluto, much further out. We found at least 4 or 5 of these, of at least very close to Pluto's size, ranging in size from Pluto down to Ceres. Ceres is also a planetoid. Why would we call Ceres a planetoid and not, let's say, Eros, an asteroid? Well, there's a couple of classification distinctions that astronomers use to decide the difference between a planet, a planetoid, and an asteroid. An asteroid, generally speaking, is irregular. The reason Ceres is considered a planetoid and not an asteroid is because Ceres is spherical. That's a good sign. It's not in orbit around another planet. That would make it a moon, by definition, because all 4 of the Jovian satellites are much larger than Ceres. So if Ganymede, for example, were in orbit around the sun, or the moon for that matter, they'd be planetoids. They'd be small planets. They're spherical. That's important because once you reach a certain size, then the gravity of the object pulls it into a sphere. That's kind of a sort of a cheesy way to put it, but that's not too far off the truth. You could have something the size of Eros, which is the gravity on Eros is so small that the gravity's not really much of a factor in the formation of the object. But when you get into something the size of Ceres, it's got enough gravity to make it into a sphere. So spherical is important. Pluto fits in the category of planetoid. It doesn't likely have a very differentiated crust, although we suspect that Ceres does, and we suspect Pluto does. Pluto, as George Freeland points out, has not only one satellite of its own. Pluto is, in fact, like the Earth, a double planet. There's only 2 double planets in the solar system. And a good rule of thumb is that a double planet is a planet where the moon is of significant size compared to the primary. Our moon's about a quarter the size of the Earth. Pluto's moon Charon is bigger in relation to to Pluto than the moon is relative to the Earth. Pluto Charon is probably the best example of a double planet in our solar system. Charon's probably 2/3 of Pluto's size. It's a double planet. And since then, we've found at least 4 or 5 other moons in orbit around Pluto Charon in the same orbital plane. So Pluto's its own little solar system. And it's not a demotion to call Pluto what it is. It's a planetoid. It's not, it just was discovered. And there's some evidence that the discovery of Pluto was accidental. The reason that, we had, let's back up a little bit. The ancients knew of 5 planets. Mercury, Venus, Earth, obviously, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. So we're not going to count the Earth. So they knew about Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, because those 5 planets are visible to the naked eye, and they could be detected by farmers and shepherds. For as long as there have been people, they could see these little lights moving across the sky. The word planet means wanderers, by the way. Planets wandered around the background stars. The background stars were fixed, but the planets moved, and that was a mystery. So we didn't know about the planet Uranus until, I want to say 1760, something like that. William Herschel discovered it. Neptune came later, and Pluto came in 1930. But here's what's interesting. Uranus was detected because they noticed that the orbit of Saturn was not behaving quite correctly. There were once you could make very, very precise observations, astronomers realized, that during parts of its orbit, Saturn was speeding up just a little bit, and then after a while, Saturn would slow down a little bit. Not by much, but by a noticeable amount. And the only way to explain that would be that there was a planet outside of Saturn's orbit that was pulling on it, and as Saturn came in on the inside lap, the planet would pull it towards it and speed Saturn up a little bit, and then as it passed it and then went around on the inside, then the gravity of that planet would be slowing Saturn down as it slowly pulled away. Very, very minor, but detectable. So once you notice this with Saturn's orbit, you can predict about where this thing should be, and because the planets more or less lie on a flat plane called the ecliptic, you had a pretty decent idea where this thing would be if it in fact existed. And brilliant astronomer named William Herschel did the calculations, figured out where this thing would be, put his decent-sized telescope, he had a pretty big telescope for a guy with his backyard, out there, took a look, and found the planet which he named George. Named it George. I don't know if he named it Georgius, but he named it George after King George. It was a planet named George for about 10 years or so, until finally the international community said, no, we don't think we like the idea of naming this planet George. So planet George was then given the name of the sky god Uranus. So, huzzah! Now, as it turns out, Uranus is, I think, 5th or 6th magnitude, which is just barely detectable to the naked eye on a dark night. If you had acute seeing, at a good eyesight on a very dark night, you know exactly where to look, you could probably spot Uranus. However, it's so faint that it wasn't routinely, regularly observed, so it was not considered one of the planets known to the ancients. Now we have Uranus. Fantastic. Got its orbit plotted. Guess what? Uranus is speeding up in parts of its orbit and slowing down in others. That's an indication that there should be another planet out there. And they applied the same procedure. They find the planet Neptune, which is named after the god of the sea. So now we're doing great. Here's the part that's interesting. There were perturbations to the orbit of Neptune that indicated another planet, which would be the 9th planet, larger enough to cause these kind of perturbations in the orbit of Neptune. And so they went looking for this. And in 1930, an astronomer named Clyde Tombaugh, working at the observatory in Arizona, Percival Lowell's observatory, which he built to use to find canals on Mars, which were an optical illusion, didn't really exist. But working late at night in Percival Lowell's observatory, he used something called blink comparison. And what he did was, Clyde Tombaugh back in 1930 had taken a series of pictures of the sky. It's really brilliant if you think about it. Series of pictures of the sky, and he had a series of binocular lenses. And one picture would light up, and then he'd turn the light off on that one and turn the light on the other one, on these negatives, and he'd blink them. And so since the stars are in the same place, blink, 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 the stars are remaining absolutely still. The stars don't change at all. But anything that's moving goes doink, 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 doink. And that's what he did. Using blink comparison, he found that there was a speck, a very faint star. All of this is from memory. I want to say that Pluto's 12th, 13th, 14th magnitude, and maybe even fainter than that, far, far, far too faint to see with the naked eye. But something was moving right where he thought it would be. He finds it. It's a microplanet. It's named Pluto. But one of the many reasons why Pluto doesn't deserve to be a planet is because Pluto's planet crosses the orbit of Neptune. For the time I was in high school, if you really wanted to be pedantic about it, you would say that the planets are Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune, because for about 30 years of Pluto's 200-plus year orbit, it's inside the orbit of Neptune, and that's suspicious and weird. And Pluto might have been a captured moon that was ejected from the solar system. Might have been a moon of Uranus that was ejected from its orbit, or not ejected from the solar system, ejected from its orbit around its primary. I don't know how much this theory still holds water, but there was some evidence that Pluto was in fact a large moon of Uranus, that whatever caused Uranus to flip over on its side, some sort of gravitational interaction, was something that was going through the solar system, launched Pluto in its own orbit, which was very eccentric. The orbit of Pluto is very eccentric, which means a very oval compared to the mostly round orbit of the planets. It's not only eccentric so that it's inside the orbit of Neptune and then mostly outside, it's also inclined at a very high angle relative to the rest of the planets. So Pluto is not a planet. Not a planet. It's different than the other planets in many, many, many ways. It's too small to be a planet. Its orbit is not circular or close to circular like the other planets, and the orbital inclination is very, very high. It's way above and below the ecliptic. It's something that was captured or ejected, and it doesn't really belong as a planet. So anyway, that's the story of Pluto. And a lot of people got all bent out of shape when they took Pluto out of the planetary world and put it into microplanet. I don't remember the name of any of these other microplanets. That's just poor publicity on their work. They need some marketing people. But as it turns out, there are other microplanets that are the size of Pluto, or very nearly the size of Pluto, and we've only discovered, there are hundreds of them, but we've only discovered 4, I want to say. Makemake sounds like one. That's about 2/3 the size of Pluto, and I forget the names of the others. But as we continue to look, we'll find more and more and more of them, and pretty soon we're going to find out that there are hundreds and hundreds of them the size of Pluto, and they're all a little bit further out there. They're all in distant orbit around the sun. They're all microplanets. They're all part of the Kuiper Belt, which is a collection of debris on the outside part of the solar system. Comets live in the Kuiper Belt. Every now and then, various gravitational perturbations will bring a comet in from the Kuiper Belt. Existing comets like Halley's Comet and the rest of them have already been diverted in and are now in eccentric orbits, but some of them are virgin comets, most of them, hundreds of thousands, probably hundreds of millions of them out there. Just frozen balls of ice the size of, Sherman Oaks. They're floating around out there, and then some fluky weird thing happens, slows it down just a little enough, and then thousands of years later it makes a close approach, spins off a beautiful tail because it's never been here before, it hasn't had all the volatiles cooked off, and there you go. That's how it works. We're basically a star with a sort of debris in close and then a large halo of more debris out further away. There's a smaller halo of debris between Mars and Jupiter, which we call the asteroid belt. It's a bit of a misnomer, really. Not really that much stuff out there, although there are thousands and thousands and thousands of them. It's just space is so big. So there you go. So no, I would not make Pluto a planet again. I think Pluto belongs being where it is, and no shame in being a microplanet if you're a microplanet. Our friend Al Conson says, are you prepared for the next monster coronal mass ejection to hit our planet? If so, what did you prepare? I'm not prepared. Most of us aren't, and we may be in for a rude surprise. Coronal mass ejection is often referred to as a solar flare. The sun, is a gigantic thermonuclear reactor, and these things can be a little dicey sometimes. Every now and then, enormous quantities of actual mass are blown out into space. Now, this kind of thing happens all the time with these beautiful prominences and these arcs that you see on the surface of the sun, and they're constrained by magnetic fields because they're plasma. They're magnetized ionized gas. It's not like flame or anything. It's just magnetized ionized gas. And most of the prominences are ejected out, and they fall back to Earth, and they fall in these cool little loops and all kinds of things. But every now and then the sun has a really good beer belch and pushes part of the atmosphere of the sun out into space. Now, you would think that over time the sun would be depleted because it is, in fact, ejecting millions and millions and millions of tons of stuff in these mass ejections. But comets are constantly falling into the sun, so the general mass stays about the same. And frankly, as a percentage of the sun's mass, it doesn't really miss. It's like us shedding skin cells during the course of the day. So, there was a giant one in the 1800s. The great thing about this show is anytime I don't know the answer to something, the answer will appear right up there in that box in about 25 seconds. Back in the 18-something or other, there was a coronal mass ejection called the something, the Wood event or something. In any event, it was a coronal mass ejection. It's the sun kicking off an awful lot of ionized gas, and it produces a tremendous amount of magnetic disruption. It's like an EMP pulse. This thing that happened in the 1800s was so enormous, that it caused operators of telegraphs to receive sparks. In other words, this thing generated such a strong magnetic field that the telegraph wire, somebody said 1859, that's Astronomy, you might know, we'll get more information in a second on this event. It produced such a strong magnetic field that the copper in telegraph wires, and a telegraph is not a microchip, folks. A telegraph is just a big, thick piece of copper wire, and you have to punch a ton of current down there. Now we got a couple of people, GK Masterson, since this was 1859. So the Compton effect, okay. In 1859, coronal mass ejection produces tremendous Carrington. That sounds right. Carrington effect, and it produced such a strong magnetic field that it was inducing enough of a current into copper wires in telegraphs that guys were getting shocked off of their telegraph machines. Now, as I said, a telegraph is a iron bar as thick as my finger with a couple of magnets connected to a big thick piece of cable. It takes a lot to hurt a telegraph. A telegraph's a pretty robust piece of equipment. Anything close to that size would basically cook all of our micro circuits. It would cook virtually all of our transmission lines. One of the most disgraceful things, and our friend Frank Gaffney is all over this thing, is how unbelievably unprepared our electrical grid is for something even close to the Carrington effect. Even close. It doesn't take a EMP attack from Iran, and these things are not like they don't happen. They happen all the time. Now, fortunately for us, when this coronal mass ejection takes place, it's got to be aimed more or less at the Earth, which means, we have a good chance of missing them. But they do happen frequently, and it's just a matter of time. And when one of these things of that magnitude appears, it's going to take down our electrical grid. Now, the bad news here is not like the grid's going to go up for an hour, or the guy's going to go for a couple days, and they're going to get the linemen out there and put it back up like we have with an ice storm or something. It's going to fry significant proportion of all of the electronics on the Earth. It's going to fry the cars. It used to be, in the old days, you had a 1970 Camaro. If you could basically maybe cook the solenoid or something, but the car's more or less intact. Nowadays, with all these cars with their own microchips, which are great because it means, remember the days when you have to go out and start a car in the morning, young, I remember those days. Those days are gone, and the reason they're gone with new cars is because the electronic ignition on modern automobiles advances and retards the spark. So they literally are telling the engine, we're going to make it easy for you to start. Why is my nose so itchy? Probably cortisol deficiency. Modern electronics means that we basically fire the spark in a way that gets the engine started, and once the engine's started, then the spark timing adjusts to get you maximum efficiency, and that's marvelous. But those circuits will go. So all of the cars will go, most of the trucks will go, the electronics are going to go, most of the electrical system will go. If the electrical system goes, it's not just that we're out of lights. I mean, most people don't understand the magnitude of this. If the electrical system is brought down, it doesn't just mean our lights are off. It means that the refrigeration in the supermarket is off, and it means that the electrical systems on trucks to bring fresh food in from the agricultural areas are gone, and it means that the security systems are gone. It means that the ATMs aren't working. It means that the lights that keep people from breaking into stores are gone. And what's going to happen is it's not just going to be ugly in terms of what happens with lack of electricity. It's going to be ugly in terms of what happens when people get the realization that there's no electricity. So it's not pretty. And the worst news is this. If we had a government that did what it was supposed to do, in other words, not get into everybody's business, get out of the way, and just be prepared for emergencies, defend the country, make sure that everybody's playing by the same set of rules, not in the game, just enforcing the game. and doing little things like being prepared, then we could protect these electrical systems. But one of the things that Frank points out is that these transformers in these sub-power stations, the ones that kick the system along, is not just the power generation plants. These electrical subsystems have transformers that are the size of diesel locomotives. And here's the best part. Not only do we not have bunches of them on the shelves as spares, virtually every single one of them is unique. It's a unique structure. It fits into that particular facility. It's not like they're standardized. It's not like you just plug them in. It takes 6 months to a year to replace one of these things, and if this kind of thing happens, we will be without electricity in this country for probably 2 to 3 years. And that is the end of America as we understand it. I mean, honestly, it's catastrophe. And it's not like, gee, this may happen someday. It's going to happen someday. It's going to happen someday. And as Glock Fanboy points out, God bless you for cheering me up here, because we don't talk about the event and remain indoors. For those of you who are, I miss the Michelin Web days, maybe I'll bring them back. That's the only thing I didn't really link to on Michelin Web. There's so many of their sketches were so much fun. I put them up on Facebook. And Michelin Web are a British comedy, sketch comedy duo. And I don't know, I may have linked to it once, but it's so dark. It's so dark. It's a game show that takes place in a post-apocalyptic future. And it's just awful. It's just hilariously funny, but they don't even know what happened. They just know it was the event. So we don't talk about the event and stay indoors. But you know what? Carrington effect level coronal mass ejection, it doesn't have to be anything like as big as the Carrington effect, by the way, will put us in the darkness for 2 or 3 years, the whole planet, and that's the end of everything. It's not the end of human civilization. It's not the end of life on Earth, but it's the end of this. And if this goes away for 2 years, what comes back after 2 years will not be what was here before, because what is the amount of food supply? By the way, water, water. Well, water, yeah. I mean, I know this is kind of shocking to people who don't think about this too much, but the water that comes out of your tap is actually pumped there. It's not manifested. It's pumped. And it's pumped by pumps that run on electricity. And even if you have a generator, if the electrical coils are cooked and the subsystems are cooked, then it's cooked and you don't have any water. So my preparation is I have a lot of water, and I've got about maybe a 6, 7, 8 day supply of food, which is not enough. So those of you who think about these things, you might want to go stock up, because, look, it's going to be like the Titanic, right? They knew they didn't have enough lifeboats, and they sailed anyway, because ships like that have never sunk, and they probably never will. They didn't sink yesterday, didn't sink today, probably won't sink tomorrow. And like you, History Dave, I hope by Vectron that this never happens, but they might. Yeah, that's plenty scary. So get some food out there, guys, and especially water. And if it does happen, don't go where the people are. That'd be my advice to you. Dave Reel wants to know how we're doing on time here. 1:42, another 15 minutes. Dave Reel says, do you believe that if we travel far enough into the infinite universe, we would encounter another Earth chock full of Earthlings? Yes and no. No, but the number, think about evolution of life on Earth and the existence of human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens, for those of us who are on the ball. If you think of it as a pachinko ball, where you launch a ball into a series of pins and it hits a pin, it bounces either left or right. It comes down to another pin, bounces either left or right. A pachinko machine is a series of these pins where balls are dropped and randomness sends them left or right. And sure enough, if you drop enough balls in a pachinko machine, you get a beautiful bell curve where most of them are in the middle, and a few of the outliers, just through random chance, have gone left all the time. Most people go left, right. You flip a coin enough, every now and then you're going to flip 10 heads in a row. Take a long time, but it'll happen. So the reason I think this is an interesting question is, no, the number of coin flips it's taken to get us here is so many. There's so many that the chances of something coming out that look even remotely like us is essentially zero. But the reason this question is interesting is because if you say that is a admission that you do not know how to handle the concepts of either infinity or eternity. Because if the universe is infinite and eternal, it's not, but it might be close. If the universe is infinite, that means that there are millions of planets exactly like the Earth. I did a science fiction story once where there's planets exactly like the Earth, indistinguishable, except the Coke cans are blue. That's the only difference. What's the chance of that happening? It's 1 in 100 billion trillion. Well, never going to happen. That means you don't understand infinity and you don't understand eternity. Because if you actually could get your monkey brain, this is what I'm talking about. This is a big breakthrough for me. We just don't have the neurons. Because if we did, we'd understand that if the universe were infinite and eternal, and it's probably not either, but if it were, then there would be endless numbers of Bill Whittles having this show exactly like right now, except that picture of Dave Bowman would have been played by a different actor. That's what infinity and eternity is now. We talk about a spin-off of this is this idea of the infinite universe, where every time any decision is made, and I don't mean a human decision as to whether or not to build a building here or to shoot a tyrannosaur, and we step off of the path, anytime rain falls, a drop of rain goes one way or another way. Every time something random happens, it creates a separate universe and spins off and forms a separate reality, and there's an infinite number of those. Where would you put them all? Well, who cares where you put them all? If there's infinity, you got all the room in the world. And if there's eternity, you got all the time in the world. Nobody really understands either of those two things. Infinity and eternity are so far beyond our ability to get a handle on. We talk about the terms. And we're comfortable talking about them. We say eternity, it's going to be here forever. Oh, okay. What was here before it? What do you mean? Is this what I'm talking about? When people criticize either the Big Bang or God, take your pick. The criticism comes down to what was here before God? Who created God? What was here before the Big Bang? What was there before the Big Bang? What do you mean before? Well, what was here before. It's always been here. Yeah, okay, but okay, yeah, sure, it's always been here, but what was here before it got here? There was no before it got here. That's where we stop. That's no matter. I don't care. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Albert Einstein. I don't care if you're Thomas Sowell. I don't even care if you're Neil deGrasse Tyson. You do not have the neurons to process infinity. You have the neurons to look at the shadow on the back of a cave that infinity makes, but you don't have the neurons to process actual infinity or eternity. For example, Big Bang theory is internally consistent. There's an enormous number of independent pathways for evidence that suggest that something very much like 15, 16, 17 billion years ago, the entire universe was in an infinitely small point of infinite density and infinite temperature. What does that mean? What do you mean, what does it mean? It was infinitely hot and infinitely dense. How hot and how dense was it? It was infinitely dense. You can't fit the entire universe into a speck the size of an atom. You can fit it into something smaller than that. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to your monkey brain. There's pretty good evidence of the Big Bang theory. In fact, there's very good evidence. Something like the Big Bang theory actually happened. And so there's this flash. And the universe expands out, right? And everything that becomes galaxies and stars and people is inside this expanding bubble that's being created through the universe. And in the first, couple millionths of a second, the expansion is tremendous. And then, you're not even a second into the universe. 2-3 seconds into the universe, the expansion slows down, blah, blah, blah. We got all this worked out. It's amazing what we can do with these hunks of jelly. Really is breathtaking. But the universe is expanding, and everything that we know of, including the laws of matter, the laws of nature, are inside the bubble, right? Not just space, not just matter, all the rules that govern space and matter are inside the bubble. What's on the other side of the bubble? What do you mean? Well, what's on the other side? The bubble is expanding out into something, right? What's on the other side? There's nothing on the other side. What does that nothing look like? Is it white? No, you don't understand. Well, is it infinite? Is it does it have matter? No, there's nothing there. Well, when you say there's nothing, does that mean there's space-time and planets on the inside and nothing on the outside? There is no outside. This is the kind of thing that interests me so much, because we can talk about it and we can be comfortable with it. The universe is expanding and now the bubble is this big, and the question is, will gravity be enough to slow down the expansion of the universe and bring it back down to another point and you have an oscillating universe? Or is the universe not enough gravity so that it keeps expanding forever? These are the big questions, and we can handle these questions. We're good at these questions. We can handle them. One of the big questions in astronomy, it's starting to look like, I forget which way it's starting to look. I want to say it's starting to look like it's not going to stop. I think that's the latest evidence. So, big bubble exploding, right? And all this bubble is expanding out into nothingness, and there's gravity because this stuff all has mass, and the gravity of each thing pulling against each other is slowing it down. And the question is there enough stuff inside the bubble to create enough gravity to eventually slow this, stop it, and then let gravity bring it back together again? Or is there not enough stuff in the middle of the bubble so that the bubble slows down? Yes, it's slowing down, but there's not enough. It's going to just keep going forever and ever and ever. Great. Fantastic. Can we process this? Yes, we can. Absolutely. That's within the ability of the human mind to reason. What's beyond the human mind to reason is what's on the other side of the bubble. Now, physicists will tell you nothing, and mathematicians will tell you nothing, and people will tell you that there's no structure, there's no space-time, it's not a vacuum, there's just nothing. There's nothing there. There's no laws of nature, there's no nothing. But we can't handle that. We think we can, but we can't handle it. We can understand that we can't handle it, and we can do the math around it, but we cannot comprehend that if empty space is a perfect vacuum that consists of 3 dimensions or 4 or 5, that there could be something on the other side of this universe bubble that has no dimension, no time, no space, no structure. We can't comprehend it. We don't have the neurons for it. We do have the neurons to make a map. We do have the neurons to make a sketch. We have the neurons to do the math, and that is miraculous, noble, magnificent, and all those other things. But I don't care who you are. You cannot get your head around eternity or infinity. You think you can, but you can't. So when you hear somebody like Dawson in the God, what is his book about? The God hypothesis? I forget. When you hear him saying, well, the reason there's no God is because you then have to ask yourself, what did God evolve from? What created God? Who was there before God? Well, Dawson, Richard, there was nothing before him. Well, he had to come from somewhere. No, he didn't. And look, I'm not trying to make a religious argument. When you apply the same thing the other way around, you can say, well, the Big Bang can't be true because what created the Big Bang? What created that little dot? What do you mean? Who put it there? Nothing put it there. What was there before it? Nothing. It's always been there. It's always been there. Always. There was no time. It's always been there. You just can't get through it. It stops. I personally am fascinated by this, and I'm also fascinated by how short are we. In other words, if you take human IQ at 100, and let's take the IQ of physicists and Einstein, 160, 170, 180, 190. There's some evidence that the smartest person who ever lived, I don't know how they figured this out, but some studies have been done that said probably the brightest guy who ever lived might have been Isaac Newton, who might have had an IQ of 200, which is, on paper, it's twice human intelligence, twice normal human intelligence. I don't know how that really boils out. But if you just take the IQ measuring system as a yardstick, I've always been fascinated to know what IQ would you need in order to actually understand infinity in the way that we understand things like the dimensions. Forget how it works, just the dimensions of the cell phone. Yeah, I can wrap my hand around how big this is. What would it take? Would it take an IQ of 300? Would it take an IQ of 1,000? I said Dawkins. Who did I say? Anyway, God delusion. Yeah. I probably got his name wrong. Thank you, Eisenfire, who stands outside the door with his flaming sword and makes sure that I don't make mistakes that last any longer than the lag on the show's production broadcast. The fact that Richard Dawkins can say, well, what came before God, means that Richard Dawkins doesn't understand eternity, and neither do I. But he thinks he does, you see? And I'm smart enough to realize I don't. Neil deGrasse Tyson thinks he's got everything figured out. He's sure he's got it all figured out. No, he doesn't know anything. Tyson and other professional astronomers and the smartest cosmologists and the smartest quantum physicists that we have are able, through incredible feats of intellectual achievement and standing on the shoulders of giants, they are able to produce a series of sketches, maps, and models that give them enough of a shadow idea of what's actually going on so they can make predictive statements. And this is an enormous achievement. I don't mean to put it down, but they don't understand this stuff. When we talk about strong nuclear force or gravity being exchanged by the exchange of particles, we don't really understand that. You know, I was looking out the window of my bedroom not too long ago. What's wrong with my nose tonight? I was looking out the window and a star was setting. I want to say it was probably Rigel. I seem to remember it was Rigel, which is in the foot of Orion, which is thousands and thousands of light years away. And I've got enough of a monkey brain to understand that the light that's entering my eyes right now was emitted from what was created at the center of a thermonuclear explosion 2,000 light years away. It's much hotter than going on in the sun, that this actual photon of light had to work its way through millions of years to get to the surface of this blue giant named Rigel, which exists out in space at this distance. And then it got to the surface, and then all of a sudden it just took off, and off it went. And this particular photon went sailing out through an infinite number of degrees and seconds and arc seconds and milliseconds of arc in a horizontal plane and a vertical plane. It just happened to go off in a certain direction. And it spent 2,000 years or whatever the distance to Rigel is. Somebody just tell me how far Rigel is. You know what, distance to Orion. I can't stand it anymore. I can do this faster than it does. Probably just ask Siri. Don't anybody tell me. I'm not even going to look anymore. I'm not just curious. This is the amazing thing about the world we live in. I want to know on my own. Oh, okay. 772.9 light years. So I'm looking at Rigel setting over the Santa Monica Mountains. I'm lying in bed. I'm awake. I happen to be awake. I happen to have enough of the window blinds open. I happen to be looking out the window. I happen to be lying in bed. I happen to be aware of seeing this particular star, and I happen to be thinking about it. So 772 years ago, this, in the year 300 or something, 1300 rather, Dark Ages, this photon decides to leave the surface of Rigel, and this photon travels through the void of space during this entire time. You know, the Crusades happen, the Dark Ages happen, there's the founding of the Declaration of Independence, the French Revolution happens, the Civil War happens, this little photon is marking its way through the universe at 186,282 miles every single second. And it and the rest of its brothers are just heading out somewhere. And then, next thing you know, there's the incredible moment where the universe stands still on April 7th, 1959. The incredible birth occurs in New York City. It's not even done yet. It's still got another 55, 56 years to go. And for the final 55 years at 186,282 miles a second, this little photon goes flicking through the universe, comes beaming in through the atmosphere, cuts through the atmosphere, just barely clears the top of the mountains, goes right through that little slot in the blinds of my window, and hits the outside of my eyelid because I happened to be blinking at that second. So that particular photon I did not get to see, but a millisecond or two later, my eyes are open again, and the guys who've been following right behind it, I do get to see. Now, how many photons have to be emitted by Rigel in order for enough of them to be able to penetrate both of the slightly millimeter or two width of my pupils on a given night? How many, forget about the timing of me watching it, just take any observer who's sitting there looking. How many photons does this thing have to push out? If you think about what the dispersion, what the arc second dispersion is for that beam to get into my into my iris, this makes me think that the idea of photons as particles is not, it just can't be true. I'm not trying to say that photons don't exist, because we do a lot of experiments that say that photons exist. What I am saying is that this idea of a particle, of a little dot, of a little grain of salt that's glowing and floating through space at the speed that enters my eyes, is a model. It's a mathematical construction that gives us some idea of what's happening, but it can't really be it. It has to be something much more organic. I don't want to say organic, much more complex than this, right? When we say that the strong nuclear charge is transferred by a certain particle, that I'm emitting particles, and that the planet is emitting particles, and my particles are attracting the Earth, Earth's particles attracting me, gravitons and all that. Look, all I'm trying to say is this. I'm not saying that these theories are not useful, and I'm not trying to claim that these interactions don't occur. What I'm trying to say is that this is the monkey brain trying to get a handle on something that is far, far, far beyond our ability to actually genuinely comprehend. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that as we get more advanced and we start getting into more advanced models that are more explanatory, things like superstring theory and so on, this is an incredible achievement. It's an amazing achievement. It sounds like I'm putting it down. I'm on the contrary. But I am saying that superstring theory, the idea that the universe is vibrating along strings that are made out of in 11 dimensions, and that they're creating physical reality, is yet another magnificent attempt of this little piece of gray cantaloupe to understand something that is so complex that we can only sketch it the way we can sketch a map of Texas, in the way that a map of Texas is not Texas. String theory, particle theory, photons, all this stuff is not the reality of the world. The reality of the world is more complex, not only more complex than we imagine, it's more complex than we can imagine. This is what fascinates me, and this is where I kind of take this back into the political world, because we have this perpetual arrogance of thinking that the model is the reality and that the map is the territory. They're not. They're not. The world is much more complex than this. It's much, much more complex than this. You cannot get to what is really happening. You can only approach it. And likewise with something like the economy. You cannot control the economy. You cannot command an economy. You got 7 billion people making individual decisions. That is not something that is predictable, plannable, or controllable. And it's orders of magnitude simpler than what we're talking about with all this subatomic particle stuff. I guess I'll wrap up the show by saying this. We're going to do more astronomy. I've got 2 more pages of questions. It'll be at least a 4-parter, I would think. But if you want to ask me what astronomy has done for me, is astronomy has confronted my intellect with problems that are so complex, so monumental, so big, that you cannot not only can you not understand them, the only thing that you can come out of this with is an appreciation and an admiration for how much we are able to do with such simple reductions of the actual universe. It's really astonishing when you think about it, how much we are able to do and build upon how little we actually know. As we speak at this very second, no matter where you are, see, right now, you're watching the show. Some of you are watching the show live. And so those of you who are watching the show live, who are commenting in the comment stream right now, are hearing words that I uttered about 7, 8, 10 seconds ago. Many of you will be watching this on YouTube. You'll be watching the show that words I uttered weeks ago, days ago, weeks ago, months ago, maybe years ago. Who are we kidding? Most of you who will be watching this show in the vast galactic empire will have been listening to words that were uttered thousands, if not millennia ago, because this wisdom, of course, is eternal, will be studied for the rest of time. So for those of you who are sitting on the planet Trantor, 75 million years from now, trying to understand what drove the 21st century, welcome, greetings. But, think about it. Just think about it for a second. Right now, you're hearing my words. You're trying to follow where I'm going with this, but you're not listening to me in real time. Everything I've already said, I've already said. And now you're hearing what I said when I stopped talking. And further down in time, we cannot function. We cannot get through our lives with an awareness of that kind of awareness. All we can do is that we can occasionally filter out everything else, filter out why the electricity is on, filter out why the air conditioning is on, filter out why my cells are creating energy and maybe not as much cortisol as I should use, but something. Why during this entire time has my heart been beating and my lungs been breathing? Why all this stuff has been filtered out? The vibration of the electrical field that's creating the LED lights around the creatures in the background, all that stuff goes away. We just assume that it's there, but it's all operating, and we have to filter all this stuff out. And we can, if we decide to, take all of this perception and concentrating exclusively on why the LED lights are working behind my Gorn Captain. And then we can take that laser beam of perception that filters out all the rest of this stuff in your family relationships and what's happening with your mom and who's going to play quarterback for the Gators next year and all that other stuff. And then we can move that spotlight from why are the LEDs functioning on that Gorn Captain to who played the actor who was in that rubber suit in 1966 or 1967. What was his name and is he still alive? And then we could take that little spotlight and shine it elsewhere. But even when we focus it, we're only getting a little bit of it. And the fact that we're not thinking about who that actor is, where is Keir Dullea right this second? Where is he right this second? What's he doing? Him, right now. What's he doing? We've been watching the show for an hour and a half. We've watched the show for 2 hours, 4 minutes, and 55 seconds, and nobody's been thinking about what's been happening to Keir Dullea right at this very second. So my point is this. Look, there is so much that we don't know. There's so little that we can think about at any given time that when we start acting like we know what we're doing, we better sit down and say, what are the parameters upon which our expertise is being based on? Do we have, in fact, the ability to make a decision in confidence? What assumptions are we assuming? What are we filtering out? This is what astronomy will lead you to if you think about it long enough, because ultimately when it's all said and done, it produces a sense of enormous humility in you. Does in me anyway. And that's when I hear stuff like this from Neil deGrasse Tyson, or when I hear Stephen Hawking talking about what's good for people politically, or when Albert Einstein says you cannot simultaneously prepare for peace and war at the same time. I say, Albert, what the hell do you know about human interaction? You know nothing about human interaction. Nothing. And people that cite you as a source are using it as a source of laziness so that they don't have to think for themselves. Well, Einstein says you have to be a pacifist. What does Einstein know about being a pacifist? Einstein knows something about cosmology. Einstein knows something about gravity. Einstein knows something about electromagnetism. Einstein knows something about relativity. He doesn't know anything about war and peace. Anything. He knows less than a farmer about war and peace, because a farmer deals with life and death on a daily basis. This is what I'm talking about, right? This is what I'm talking about, is getting out of the arrogance of assuming that your area of expertise applies to areas that it doesn't. And also a realization of just how shallow your area of expertise is, no matter how deep it is relative to other people. You got to come from a place of humility on all this stuff, because if you don't, you're going to get into trouble. And that's when you get into people like Hillary Clinton, who are convinced they know what's best for everybody, and they don't. People would say, well, Bill, you've got this incredible perception and you've got this great sense of perspective and humility. Why don't you tell us what you think would be best for other people? And my response would be, what the hell do I know about what's best for other people? If I was given absolute authority, the first thing I would do is, and I mean I would do it instantly, if somebody said to me, here is unlimited political power, it's yours, the first thing I would do is I would eliminate my political power. And I do it quickly before I succumb to the temptation to do some good with it. If I was president of the United States, I would make one executive order. And my one executive order would be to invalidate every existing executive order. That would be my executive order. Executive Order 2917 voids all existing presidential executive orders. That's what it does. It voids them. It voids them within 6 months. And now you can get the legislature to go ahead and approve things that need to be approved. If they need to be continued for whatever reason, then get them in front of the Congress and have them debated the way any other law would be done. That's the first thing I would do as president. I'd make an executive order that made I'd make two. One would void all existing executive orders, and the second one would make executive orders illegal. Bam. That's what I would do. That's what the study of astronomy has taught me. It's taught me the humility of how little I know. It's taught me how much I don't know. And I think about the days I went around sure that I knew the answers to all this stuff. I knew the answers to God, the universe, and everything. I knew how we got here. I knew where we were going. I knew how big the universe was. I knew what it was made of. I knew how many people there were out there. I didn't know anything, and I still don't. It's not to say you can't know it. It's not to say that it's not worth trying to know it. It is to say that you better have some humility strapped to your belt in place of your six-shooters, because you are going to be making assumptions no matter what you do, and the best we can hope for as human beings is to at least have some vague idea of what those assumptions are, so that we can keep some kind of perspective. That's about it. In any event, ladies and gentlemen, we're now 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 15 seconds into the cortisol-deprived Stratosphere Lounge, episode 94, 95, part 2 of our giant vast astronomy series. We'll do part 3 hopefully next week, and week 3, 4 the week after that. I'm going to try and get in with enough time to get all this stuff set up again, and hopefully I won't have to, resist the temptation to take this beautiful expensive chair and throw it right through that beautiful expensive monitor and take the camera out with it, because none of this stuff makes any sense to me. If I can't figure out how to work out a USB camera, then who am I to think I got, your child rearing practices under control? Just doesn't make any sense to me. You never know. Anyway, thank you so much for all of your support and time, and thank you for the kind words. I certainly didn't mean to scare anybody. I just going to walk it back and deliver as much as I can, and stay in the game. I got a lot to do. And the thought of me at 100% ought to scare you. Ought to scare you the same way that it scares Jim Kirk when he sees his friend with his eyes turning silver in Where No Man Has Gone Before. Jim, we could be like gods. Yeah, that ought to scare the daylights out of people. Anyway, I'm relieved to know what's wrong with me. I'm relieved to know why I'm so tired. I'm relieved to know why my nose itches so much. I'm relieved about all this other stuff, and I want to be around for a long time. So there you go, folks. I'm going to take good care of myself, and if you have any suggestions, especially if you can give me some background on what happened with Glenn Beck, I'd love to talk to him about it. I wouldn't be surprised if we went a little bit nutty and off the rails for the same reason. It's hard to look at the world out there and stay sane. Forget the universe. It's all the stuff that's happening politically. It's enough to make a person want to climb up a rope and just keep climbing. But anyway, that's that. I'll try and take a little better care of myself and get a little more sleep, a little more rest, eat a little better, and who knows what could happen when we get this battle station fully armed and operational. Until then, this is the Stratosphere Lounge. Thank you so much for your support and your kindness, as always. I am now going to bring up the banner, which will probably show the image behind it. I'm going to, sure enough. And I'm going to try and remain calm in the face of all of this. So, calmly, here's our defective banner to close the show. And we'll work on it and see if we can't get it resolved next time. All right, everybody, take care of yourselves. We'll see you. Bye-bye now.